Yes, I'm here today and I'd like to introduce Lisa Wentz and thank you for being part of this showcase I'm doing on anxiety and confidence. So many of people who do have anxiety show up at meetings and it's not just about stage, it really is about life for me and people finding a way to be confident in their own skin. So today I'll introduce Lisa. She's a renowned public speaking and leadership coach. And I'm happy today to have you here, Lisa. And
Thank you.
you're welcome. And so our question for the day is,
Yeah.
in your work, because I know you have a book, Grace Under Pressure, and just that idea too, just the sense of being and in your own grace when there is pressure. And I know that speaking in public, it can cause a lot of pressure for people. But so in your experience, what would you say is one of the best strategies that you have for helping people with anxiety?
Well, I dig very quickly to the root of the problem, find out what it is that's causing the anxiety. So if it's something that's more deeply rooted, perhaps they were given pretty negative messaging growing up, either by caregivers or bullying or in school by teachers, something that they've absorbed over the years and really never unraveled. Sometimes I think a lot of my clients have a hard time connecting the dots. They know something's bothering them, but they don't know quite what it is or how it affected them. And so what ends up happening is they get a physiological response first and foremost, and they start to identify that in terms of anxiety when they're either at a meeting or they're presenting material or they're giving a radio interview. It could be anything. Like you said, public speaking is a pretty large umbrella. And so really the number one strategy for me, if it's about anxiety, is to identify where did it start? How did it start? And bring that onto the table so that we can really look at it. And by doing that and bringing some awareness, then we can come up with some solutions. Some of the solutions that I think are pretty universal is acknowledging where it came from, then deciding to shift focus off of the self and onto the work and onto the messaging and what you're trying to convey. And another piece of that puzzle, I realize I'm not giving you one answer, I'm giving you many answers. And that puzzle is to uh, not try to deny the realities in the room, not try to say to yourself, oh, it'll just go away if I bury it, or I'll just ignore it, or these kinds of things. Then it just festers and it keeps speaking to you louder and louder, right? So that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is the physiological part. If you are having an adrenaline rush, if you're having anxiety that's causing you to tense, you need a physical release of that anxiety and a physical toolkit help you with the breathing, the slowing down of the adrenaline rush, the clearing up the head so that you can think and focus on what you're doing. So I think that there's kind of three steps to it. The first is identification, really being honest with yourself. The second is dealing with the physiological part and how it affects you on a physiological level. And then the third is to redirect and focus on your delivery. Why is it important? What is the work really to do in the room? And staying focused on that, which keeps you focused on the outside as opposed to going internal with worry and anxiety. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think what you just did very clearly was to speak to the complexity of it and to break it down into, of course, the physical is what shows up for people. And there has to be some strategy and some recognition to breathe or to at least have some techniques that work for
Yeah.
and different people have different techniques, kind of the counting backwards or anything. And then the second thing that you were saying, I really also like is what's the root? Like people want to just put that was the past, this is now, but whatever they experience lives inside. So I like that idea. And then
Yeah.
shifting the focus to what the purpose is. I mean, to take the focus off of all of this and to give give it to what the whole point is about.
Yeah. Yeah, anxiety is often in the public speaking world is often caused by this pressure to perform, pressure, self-imposed pressure for perfection, coupled with a fear of being judged. And ultimately, even if we are in rooms that are a little less kind than we want them to be, because sometimes that can happen, sometimes there is some judgment. Maybe we have colleagues or a supervisor that isn't the warmest, right? So it does happen. But ultimately, really, the worst critic, the worst judge is the inner critic. And I think that looking at it from that angle and really facing that critical side, the side that wants to judge you from inside, can really help alleviate a lot of the pressure,
Mhm.
the self-imposed pressure. Because ultimately that's what we fear. When we fear public speaking, that's really what we fear. It's not so much that they're going to judge us, it's that we're going to feel judged and then our inner critic will judge us.
Oh, great clarification. That's what happens. Yeah, that in psychology we call it projection. Yeah, they project out onto others what's really going on inside of themselves, and to help them see it really is an inside job.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good way of putting it, inside job. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to point to?
In terms of anxiety around public speaking and whatnot, I think that, finding the antidotes and the remedies, when we do the work, it really does need to be um, the exact opposite, the counter, right? So the counter of the inner critic is self empathy, embracing who we are, embracing our own authenticity, and knowing that the outside world, really, that's what they crave. We don't want to see fake on stage. We don't want to see fake show up at a meeting. We want to see authenticity. And when people can start to pull back the layers a little bit and show up, really show up as themselves, you know, for what's appropriate in the moment anyway, then the more their confidence will build, the better they'll feel about themselves, and the better they'll be received.
Yes, and this whole idea of showing up in your authentic self. I know a lot of speaking coaches, people say, "Oh, just be yourself." But what you're doing, what I get is like, well, you have to learn what all this is happening inside. Who are you really? And to identify the critic, which is part of yourself, the authentic one, which is another part of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the work works, that's for sure, right?
That's a great way to say it. The work works. Yes.
But those
Uh-huh.
little comments of, oh, just do this. It's like, well, it's not that easy to just don't worry about it. It's kind of like, well, that's if it was that easy, sort of like saying, just go on a diet. Really? If it was that easy, then everyone would be completely mentally free and we'd all be in great shape. There is no just do this kind of
Right.
thinking along these lines when we're human beings, we're complex creatures. So,
Right. Well,
yeah.
thank you. I think that you've really provided a wonderful perspective on the what it takes for people to move through, and it's really a personal development program. I think is what you're talking about, and their discovery. And not only do you discover the scary parts of yourself and how mean you could be to yourself, but also the beauty and the wisdom that lurks within, and the precious, precious self. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yes.